The morning sun caught the polished brass nameplate as Robert Sterling pushed through the heavy oak doors of Meadowbrook Country Club. His worn boots squeaked against marble floors that probably cost more than his annual rent. The place smelled like money, leather chairs, fresh flowers, and that particular scent of privilege he'd never been able to name. Robert adjusted his flannel shirt, feeling the rough patch his girlfriend Sarah had sewn over a tear last month. The fabric felt alien against his calloused hands as he took in the soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Somewhere in the distance, the gentle thwack of golf balls mixed with refined laughter. He'd never belonged anywhere like this. Hell, he'd never belonged anywhere. Period. The foster homes had taught him that lesson early. 12 different families in 18 years. Each one reminding him he was temporary, just passing through. Even at 32, working under car hoods at Martinez Auto Shop, he still felt like that kid waiting for someone to tell him it was time to pack his bag. But this time was different. This time, he had a reason to be here. The health scare 3 months ago had changed everything. When Dr. Patterson mentioned the need for family medical history, Robert realized he had nothing. No names, no faces, no stories. Just a birth certificate with a father unknown, stamped across it like a warning label. That's when he'd hired Morrison, the private investigator who cost him 2 weeks' pay just for the consultation. Morrison had found something, enough to make Robert sell his vintage Harley to fund a deeper search. The trail led here to this place where people like him weren't supposed to exist. "Can I help you?" A woman's voice, warm but cautious. Robert turned to find a middle-aged receptionist watching him from behind an antique desk. Her nameplate read, Margaret Sullivan, and her eyes held the kind of wariness that came from years of reading people. "I'm looking for information about the Sterling family," Robert said, his voice rougher than he intended. "William Sterling." Margaret's face shifted almost imperceptibly. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. "Are you family?" The question hit like a punch to the gut. Family. Such a simple word for something he'd never really had. "Maybe," Robert said. "That's what I'm trying to find out." Margaret studied him for a long moment, and Robert felt exposed under her gaze. She seemed to be seeing something he couldn't understand, like looking at a puzzle piece that almost fit. "The Sterlings built this place," she said finally. "Been members since 1924. Though William passed away about 5 years ago." 5 years. Robert's chest tightened. If William Sterling was his father, he'd missed him by 5 years. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the marble, and Margaret's expression changed. Her shoulders tensed, and she glanced toward the main corridor with something that looked like concern. "You might want to," she started, but the footsteps were already rounding the corner. The man who appeared had the kind of posture that screamed authority, shoulders back, chin slightly raised, every step deliberate. His navy blazer looked pressed enough to cut glass, and his gray hair was styled with military precision. When his eyes landed on Robert, they narrowed with immediate disapproval. "Excuse me." The voice carried the crisp accent of old Northeast money. "I'm Charles Hampton, club manager. I don't believe we've met." It wasn't a greeting, it was an interrogation. Robert straightened, feeling suddenly aware of every stain on his jeans. "Robert Sterling. I was just asking about—" "Sterling?" Charles's eyebrows shot up. "I'm afraid there's been some mistake. The Sterling family doesn't have any relatives of your apparent circumstances." The words hit like a slap. Margaret shifted uncomfortably behind her desk, but Charles was already moving, positioning himself between Robert and the main corridor like a well-dressed bouncer. "I think you're lost," Charles continued, his tone suggesting this wasn't a suggestion. "The service entrance is around back." Heat crawled up Robert's neck. "I'm not looking for the service entrance. I'm looking for information about William Sterling." Charles's smile could have frozen July. "Mr. Sterling was a respected member of this club for over 40 years. I seriously doubt he had any connection to someone like you." The dining room doors swung open, releasing the gentle hum of Sunday brunch conversation and the clink of crystal glasses. Well-dressed couples at white-clothed tables turned their heads, curiosity sparked by the raised voices in the lobby. "Sir, you need to leave." Now, Charles stepped closer, and Robert caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with barely concealed disdain. "This is a private club, members only. I understand that, but—" "No buts." Charles's voice rose just enough to carry into the dining room. "Security will escort you out if necessary." The conversations in the dining room had stopped entirely now. Robert felt dozens of eyes on him. Women in pearls pausing mid-sip of their mimosas. Men in polo shirts leaning forward to get a better look at the spectacle. Their stares felt heavy, judgmental, like he was some kind of exhibit. A woman in a Chanel suit whispered something to her companion, who chuckled softly. Another couple openly pointed. Robert's hands clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'll go," Robert said quietly, meeting Charles's glare head-on. "But this isn't over." "Oh, I think it is." Charles gestured toward the door with theatrical authority. "And I suggest you don't come back. We have excellent security here." Robert walked toward the exit, each step echoing in the sudden silence. Behind him, he could hear the whispered commentary starting up again, the kind of casual cruelty that people with money seem to wear like jewelry. As the heavy doors closed behind him, Robert stood on the pristine steps of Meadowbrook Country Club, feeling smaller than he had since childhood. But beneath the humiliation, something else was building, something that felt a lot like determination. 3 days later, Margaret couldn't stop thinking about the young man Charles had thrown out. Something about his face nagged at her like a half-remembered dream. She'd worked at Meadowbrook for 15 years, seen 3 generations of members come and go, but those eyes, dark, intense, searching, felt familiar. During her lunch break, Margaret pulled open the bottom drawer of her desk where she kept personal items alongside club memorabilia. Her fingers found the yellowed photograph tucked behind her daughter Emma's college graduation picture. The black and white image showed a group of young men at the club's 1968 golf tournament, all bright smiles and summer tans. Her breath caught. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Third from the left stood William Sterling, maybe 25 years old, with the same strong jawline, the same dark eyes, the same way of holding his shoulders. The similarity to Robert was so striking it made her hands shake. Margaret had always prided herself on discretion. It's what kept her employed after her divorce 2 years ago, what helped her afford Emma's tuition at UConn. But this felt bigger than job security. She logged into the club's archive system, her heart racing as she searched for William Sterling's membership records. What she found in the old files made her stomach drop. A notation from 1975, buried deep in legal documents. Payment made to M. Rodriguez for services rendered. Matter closed by mutual agreement. The clinical language couldn't hide what it really meant. Margaret had seen enough wealthy families handle their scandals to recognize a cover-up when she saw one. Someone had been paid to disappear, and Margaret was beginning to understand exactly who. James Morrison's office smelled like stale coffee and old cigarettes, but the manila folder in his hands contained information worth more than Robert had ever imagined. The private investigator's weathered face was grim as he spread documents across his cluttered desk. "Found it buried in probate records," Morrison said, sliding a photocopy toward Robert. "Will was filed 2 weeks before William Sterling's death. Look at this." Robert's eyes scanned the legal language until they hit the crucial line. "I leave the entirety of Meadowbrook Country Club property to my son, Robert Sterling, wherever he may be." The words blurred as Robert stared at them. His father had known, had looked for him. "Problem is proving you're that Robert Sterling," Morrison continued. "Birth records were sealed. Adoption papers destroyed in a fire. We need DNA evidence, but that means exhuming the body or finding living relatives willing to cooperate." Robert's savings account had exactly $47 left. He'd already sold his motorcycle to pay Morrison's retainer, and Sarah had been covering groceries for 2 weeks. The legal fees alone would cost thousands he didn't have. Meanwhile, Eleanor Whitmore sat in her pristine living room, reviewing the morning's phone calls. As president of Meadowbrook's social committee, she heard everything first. The rumors about some imposter claiming to be William Sterling's son had reached her within hours of Robert's visit. Eleanor had lost her husband 6 months ago, and her grip on the social hierarchy felt more fragile each day. Protecting the club's traditions wasn't just about preserving the past. It was about securing her future in a world where widows became invisible faster than morning dew. Morrison's second call came at midnight, jarring Robert from restless sleep. The investigator's voice was heavy with the weight of ugly truth. "Found her?" Morrison said. "Maria Rodriguez. She was 19, worked as a housekeeper for the Sterling family in 1975. Get this, William Sterling Sr. paid her $50,000 to give up the baby and disappear." Robert sat on the edge of his bed, the phone trembling in his hand. He knew. More than knew. "I found a private investigator's report from 1973. Sterling hired someone to confirm paternity, then had his lawyers draw up papers to make the whole thing disappear. Your mother was threatened with deportation if she ever tried to contact the family. The betrayal cut deeper than Robert expected. His father hadn't just abandoned him, he'd actively erased him, chosen reputation over blood, money over love. There's more, Morrison continued. Young Sterling was married at the time. High society wife, big wedding in the society pages. The affair would have destroyed his social standing. Across town, Charles Hampton stared at his bank statements with growing panic. Vivian's latest spa retreat to Switzerland had cost $12,000. Her shopping sprees, the private yoga instructor, the organic meal delivery service, the bills kept mounting while his salary stayed the same. The small amounts he'd skimmed from club accounts started as temporary loans to himself. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, just until he got ahead. But Vivian's appetite for luxury grew faster than his ability to replace the missing funds, and now he was looking at a deficit that would destroy everything. Robert found himself returning to Meadowbrook despite Charles's threats, drawn by something he couldn't name. He started parking across the street, watching the rhythms of the place. That's when he noticed Jose Martinez and his crew working the gardens. The head gardener looked up from pruning roses when Robert approached the fence. Most members walked past the Latino workers like they were invisible, but Robert had grown up being invisible himself. Beautiful work, Robert said in Spanish, grateful for the classes he'd taken at community college. Jose's weathered face broke into a surprised smile. Gracias. 23 years I work here. They talked through the chain-link fence about soil pH and drainage problems, about Jose's 3 kids who'd all graduated college on his gardener's salary. Jose's eyes lit up when he mentioned his dream of starting his own landscaping business. Someday, Jose said, then shrugged. Hey, but this job, it's steady. When Robert mentioned his own struggles, Jose nodded with understanding. I see you that day. With the manager, he forgets we have eyes too. That evening, Sarah barely looked up from her beer when Robert told her about the inheritance possibility. She was still in her work coveralls, grease under her fingernails from a transmission rebuild. So what happens to us if you become one of them? She asked finally. Robert reached for her hand, but she pulled away. It doesn't change anything between us. Everything changes, Robert. You just can't see it yet. Jennifer Hampton ladled soup into bowls at the downtown shelter, her designer jeans traded for a simple t-shirt and apron. The homeless men and women who lined up for dinner didn't know her father managed Greenwich's most exclusive country club. Here, she was just Jenny, the volunteer who remembered their names and asked about their stories. You look troubled tonight, Jenny, said Marcus, a veteran who'd been sleeping rough for 3 years. Jennifer paused, thinking about the man her father had humiliated. Something about Robert's quiet dignity reminded her of the people she served here, proud despite their circumstances, searching for belonging in a world that judged them by appearances. Back at Meadowbrook, Margaret discovered more documents in William Sterling's personal files. A medical form listed a contact number for emergency situations involving family matters. Her hands shook as she recognized the area code. It matched Robert's current address. Eleanor Whitmore stood in her empty mansion, surrounded by photographs of a life that felt increasingly hollow. Her husband's death had stripped away more than companionship. It had revealed how little substance lay beneath their social facade. The young man claiming Sterling blood. She'd seen his eyes through the dining room windows that day. They held the same desperate loneliness she felt every morning. Word spread quietly among Meadowbrook's staff. The gardeners, waiters, and housekeepers had all witnessed Robert's humiliation, but also his kindness. They'd never had someone speak to them as equals before. Morrison's voice cracked when he called with the discovery that changed everything. Found a sealed safe in Sterling's study. The family lawyer finally gave me access. The letter inside was handwritten, dated just days before William Sterling's death. To my son Robert, if you ever read this, I spent 30 years trying to find you. The guilt ate at me daily. I mortgaged Meadowbrook to fund private investigators, medical research, anything that might lead me to you. The club will be sold in 2 weeks to pay the debt. I'm dying, knowing I failed you twice. Once when I let them take you away, and again, because I can't find you to make it right. You are my greatest regret and my deepest love. The inheritance is real, but it comes with this burden. Save what I couldn't, if you choose to forgive what I can't undo. Robert's hands trembled as Morrison read the words aloud. His father had spent a fortune trying to find him, had sacrificed the family legacy in the search. Charles felt his world collapsing when the sale announcement reached the board. 2 weeks meant auditors, investigators, discovery of his embezzlement. His carefully constructed life would crumble in public view. Eleanor stared at her reflection in the dining room windows, watching her social kingdom prepare to vanish. Without Meadowbrook, she was just another wealthy widow in a town full of them. The staff whispered in worried clusters. Jose calculated his children's college expenses against an uncertain future. Margaret thought about Emma's tuition and her own mortgage. The rejection letter from the probate court felt like a death sentence. Insufficient documentation to verify identity and lineage. Robert's legal claim had crumbled under the weight of destroyed records and sealed files. Sarah's words echoed in his empty apartment. "I can't compete with a ghost, Robert. You're choosing a dead man's dream over what we have." She'd packed her things that morning, taking her laughter and her certainty with her. The club members had organized faster than Robert expected. Eleanor led a coalition of traditionalists who viewed his claim as an assault on their way of life. They hired lawyers, questioned his motives, painted him as a con artist in whispered conversations over brandy and cigars. Charles saw opportunity in Robert's desperation. A few planted items in the young man's jacket, a witness or two claiming they'd seen him near the cash office. The embezzlement could become theft, Charles could play the hero, and his own crimes would disappear in the chaos. Jose found Robert sitting in his truck across from the club, staring at the place that might have been his birthright. "The staff, we worry," Jose said quietly. "New owners. They might clean house, start fresh." Robert understood. His pursuit of belonging was costing other people their security. The gardeners, the waiters, Margaret, they all had families depending on jobs that hung in the balance because of his selfish need to find his place in the world. Eleanor's voice was steady as she called the emergency board meeting. "We need to address this situation before the sale proceeds." The mahogany conference room felt like a courtroom as Robert entered, his calloused hands contrasting sharply with the polished table. "Tell us why we should believe you," Eleanor said, not unkindly. Robert's voice started quietly. "I've lived in 12 foster homes, never had a family photo, never knew where I came from. When I needed medical history for a health scare, I had nothing." His hands trembled slightly. "I'm not here for money. I just wanted to know who I was." The silence stretched until Eleanor spoke, her voice breaking. 25 years ago, my daughter gave up a baby for adoption. I never met my granddaughter." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I've regretted staying silent every day since." Margaret stood suddenly, pulling documents from her folder. "I found more evidence. Phone records, medical files. Robert's story checks out." Jennifer Hampton rose next, her voice firm. "My father made mistakes, but he's not evil. This club has always been about second chances for the right people. Maybe it's time we expanded our definition of right." Robert looked around the room at faces watching him with new attention. "If I inherit this place, I don't want revenge. I want partnership." His eyes found Charles. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. The weight of decision settled on his shoulders, not just about claiming his birthright, but about what kind of man he wanted to be. The summer ball arrived like a perfect storm of tradition and change. Robert stood before his mirror, adjusting the bow tie Eleanor had insisted on lending him. The tuxedo fit perfectly, a gift from Jose's cousin, who owned a formal wear shop and understood the importance of looking the part. "You clean up good, hermano," Jose had said, pride evident in his weathered face. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and generations of wealth, but Robert no longer felt intimidated. He understood now that elegance wasn't about money. It was about respect, and respect had to be earned. "Robert?" He turned to see Sarah in the doorway, breathtaking in a midnight blue gown that transformed her completely while somehow making her more herself than ever. "Eleanor insisted I borrow this," Sarah said, smoothing the silk nervously. "Said you'd need someone who knew the real you tonight." Before Robert could respond, Morrison appeared with a legal document that would change everything. DNA results came back. "You're definitely William Sterling's son. The inheritance is yours." The announcement rippled through the ballroom like electricity. Charles stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "I need to say something publicly." His voice carried over the stunned crowd. "I've been embezzling from the club. Mr. Sterling has offered me partnership instead of prosecution. I'm accepting his mercy and vowing to earn back your trust." Eleanor raised her champagne glass. to Robert Sterling, who's shown us that true nobility isn't inherited, it's chosen. Jose appeared in a new supervisor's jacket, grinning as he shook hands with board members who were finally learning his name. The staff moved through the crowd with new dignity, no longer invisible servants but valued members of the Meadowbrook family. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Country Club still gleamed with the same polished elegance, but something fundamental had shifted in its soul. The morning air carried the sound of children's laughter alongside the traditional thwack of golf balls as local families enjoyed their designated community hours. Robert stood on the terrace, watching 12-year-old Marcus Williams line up his first golf shot. The boy's scholarship covered not just lessons, but also the confidence that came from belonging somewhere that valued potential over pedigree. "Not bad for a kid from the projects," Sarah said, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. She still wore her work clothes most days, still had grease under her fingernails, but she moved through Meadowbrook with the easy confidence of someone who knew she was loved for exactly who she was. "Eleanor's bringing 3 more families next week," Robert said, accepting the coffee gratefully. In the gardens, Jose supervised a crew that now included his youngest son, home from agricultural college with plans to revolutionize the club's sustainability practices. Jose's landscaping business was booming, but he'd chosen to maintain his role at Meadowbrook because, as he told Robert, "This place finally feels like home." Charles emerged from the administrative offices, his face lighter than it had been in years. His marriage to Vivian had survived his confession, barely, but honest communication had rebuilt something stronger than their previous facade. His embezzlement debt would take 3 years to repay, but he slept peacefully now. Margaret waved from her new office, where her nameplate read, Assistant Administrator. Emma had graduated summa cum laude and was starting medical school in the fall, her tuition secured by one of Robert's new scholarship programs. Eleanor approached the terrace, her arm linked with a young woman Robert didn't recognize. "Robert, I'd like you to meet someone special," Eleanor said, her eyes bright with joy. "This is Catherine, my granddaughter." The reunion Eleanor had dreamed of for 25 years had happened because Robert's story gave her courage to reach out, to risk rejection for the possibility of love. As the sun set over Meadowbrook, Robert reflected on the truth he'd discovered. Belonging wasn't about blood or money or the right clothes. It was about choosing to see the humanity in everyone, about building bridges instead of walls. The country club still maintained its traditions, still hosted elegant gatherings and maintained its impeccable standards, but now it also hosted community barbecues, scholarship ceremonies, and family days where laughter echoed through halls once reserved for whispered conversations about stock portfolios. True worth, Robert had learned, wasn't inherited, it was created, one act of kindness at a time.